All right. Hello, everybody. Hope you all are doing well. This is DFS Army's tournament strategy show. Well, we'll take a glance at last night's slate, see what went well, what might not have gone as well, and then we'll game plan today's slate, look at potential leverage plays, guys who might want to be double the field on, guys who could be a little sneaky. A lot of news that will impact this slate per usual, but let's get to it. Michael Ortiz, good to see you. You said it was not a good slate last night, but today is a new day. You're exactly right. Yesterday was a positive one for me, but it wasn't anything special. Jay said definitely need at least one guy from 10 p.m. games. Today, yeah, I agree with that. I don't like to live in absolutes most of the time, but I think today's one of those days. What's up, Charlie? Hope life's treating you well. Let's look at last night. We had some takedowns last night, mostly in tiers. Sorry, guys, I didn't have time to take those screenshots, but congrats to y'all. I think we had some $2,000-$3,000 winners there, so snaps to y'all. For last night, this was the $100,000 winning lineup. Jarrett Butler, Justin Champagny were in there. Those are two guys that we had exposure to, so that wasn't a surprise. Cole Anthony going up against the Charlotte Hornets. We know the Hornets are a bad team, so it didn't shock me that a Magic player went off. I liked Paolo a bit more. I liked Wendell Carter Jr. a bit more, but they just didn't see their usual run with the blowout happening so fast, and they just weren't efficient enough in the time they did play to really get there for me. But happens. No one really played Cole Anthony, but I understand why he made sense there. Jabari Smith didn't break the world or, he didn't do anything too crazy, but he did enough to make this line at 6,900. Similar situation with Daniel Gafford. I know he was in and out of the lineup a little bit during the game, but he still did enough to make this 100K line. Jalen Green smashed. I wish I had more Jalen Green, but I was still over the field on him. So the Rockets, we had a shit ton of Rockets last night. Fred VanVleet was a huge disappointment. Freaking hate that. But all in all, it was an okay night. Jay McDaniels was the sneaky Timberwolves player you needed after that news. He was only 2.3% owned. He wasn't someone I forced exposure to, but I didn't make too many pivots post lock. And then Luka Doncic was the stud you needed. He just had a lot of raw points in a pretty soft matchup, but again, he didn't do anything too crazy. So interesting slate last night. Like I said, was positive, but nothing special. I'm doing all right, Michael. Are you doing okay? That's the question. Mo said, hello, everyone. What's up? Yeah, it's an interesting time. We have the NCAA tournament coming around. I don't know. For me, life is a little crazy, but not in a bad way. So I'll take it. Let's go ahead and jump into today's slate because we're in for another roller coaster ride. It's gonna be like this towards the end of the season. For me, I always say I'm at my best from a DFS standpoint at the start of the season because I'm usually better at picking up trends than most of the rest of the industry. Middle of the season, I start to fall off a bit because I hate doing what everyone else does. And then once we get to the playoffs, I usually start to shine again there because you can get a little bit different and you can usually benefit a bit more during the playoffs. So we're good. We're good. This slate's gonna be fun. So let's look at it. Daniel, what's up? No worries, man. Learning. Hey, man. Fantastic. Moving to our house Saturday, still unpacking. Thanks, man. Thank you for thanking me, but that is awesome. Moving into a house is a game changer. But let's get to today's slate. First off, we have the Miami Heat going up against the Cavs. This is a close spread, negative 1.5 point spread, very low game total. Both of these teams have some pretty important questionable tags. No one really knows what's going to happen here. From a DFS standpoint, a lot of what I'm doing will revolve around the injury news. Jimmy Butler's questionable, Bam Adebayo's questionable, and Nikola Jovic is questionable. Jimmy Butler and Bam Adebayo do a lot for this team. If Bam Adebayo gets ruled out, my interest in the front court Cavs go up. Jimmy Butler is a viable play, but at 8K, I just think there's better options for us on this slate. It's more, the way I'm thinking about it is that if Jimmy Butler gets ruled out, I'm just more excited to play other Miami Heat players, especially when we have Duncan Robinson out. And if we get one of Bam and Jovic out with him, guys like Terry Rozier would see a nice boost. Caleb Martin, Jaime, all become much more viable just with Jimmy Butler getting ruled out by himself. Bam is another big one. Might look at guys like Highsmith or whoever they decide to start there. Thank God this is the first game on the slate because the starting lineup for the Miami Heat will dictate a lot. There's even a chance that we see guys like Wright and Patty Mills start tonight. And if they start, they are very viable plays. I would assume there's at least one of Bam, Butler, or Jovic out in those situations, but man, Heat could be interesting, or they could be a team that's pretty easy to check off if they all play tonight. The Cavs, I like a lot, even though it looks like they're not looking too popular at this point in time. Dean Wade is already out. Donovan Mitchell's been out. Evan Mobley's been out. Max Strus has been out. One thing that the Miami Heat have going for them is that the Cavs defense is starting to deteriorate a bit without guys like Mobley, Mitchell, and just their starters playing. This is no longer a team to fear, but they still play at a pretty slow pace. So that's one reason why I am kind of excited about the Heat, potentially if we get some injury news. Similar situation for the Cavs, but like I said, if Bam Adebayo is out, I am going to play Jared Allen, and I will be significantly over the field on him and feel really good about it. Because the matchup will be softer, and Jared Allen still isn't that expensive at 8,100, and I always like playing him when Mobley's out. Darius Garland has not been that guy lately, but he's still cheap. And the Heat are, let me double check this before I say it, because I know y'all love to call me out when I'm wrong. Yeah, the Miami Heat just aren't this elite defense. They are a defense that I do try to steer away from, but pretty average for the most part. So in general, 7,800, Darius Garland, I like a lot on this slate with him being pretty cheap. Sim Auto doesn't like him. I just like him. Very avoidable. If you don't like him, you don't have to play him. I know he hasn't been in great form. There's another guard we'll talk about who's in a similar situation, but I'm going to be over the field on Garland tonight. Sam Earl's fine. I'm just going to trust the DS on that situation. My main priorities are Jared Allen if Bam is out, and Darius Garland I'm playing no matter what. Oh, man, I thought Tyrese Halliburton was going to be a little sneaky today, and that ownership is a little shocking. Did not see that coming. Mega Royal said, would have smoked my single entry if I played anybody not named Grant sorry-ass Williams. Yeah. I don't think, I think there's a lot of people over the years who can say something very similar to that, man. What's up, Coach Chris? Glad you were able to make it, man. Sam said got 6 in the 20 max last night, 8 points shy. That is incredible, though, man. Getting a top 10 line in the 20 max contest, you're doing something right. That's good stuff. Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things, Michael. Like sometimes I have some opinions, sometimes you do kind of just like follow what makes sense. It just depends on the day. What's up, Nikki? Hope you're doing all right. All right, so for the Pacers tonight, I really like Tyrese Halliburton, but he's been really bad. The matchup against the Pistons is great. This game has the highest game total, but that's pretty normal for both the Pistons and the Pacers. I like the Pacers tonight because of the soft matchup against the Pistons, but if you can't tell, I'm really starting to get bummed out about the Halliburton ownership. It's at 20%, and just given his form, I was hoping he would be a little lower owned, and I wouldn't be eating chalk playing Tyrese Halliburton. He still makes a lot of sense because he's no longer 9K. He has a very soft matchup. Everyone knows we can pick on Detroit, but they're giving up the 9th most fantasy points allowed to point guards. So Halliburton's in a really good spot here. This should be a good bounce back spot, but he was someone I was looking at as a potential leverage play, but at this ownership, I am comfortable being over the field, but I'm really just going to make sure he's showing up for me at this point. Bit of a buzzkill. Siakam, Turner, Nesmith is someone that the sim model likes a lot, so worth mentioning him. All these guys are projecting well, per usual for me when it comes to the Pacers and the highest total game in general. there's one guy I'm going to force and make sure I'm at least at field weight exposure on. That's going to be Halliburton. And then ideally, with everyone else projecting pretty well, the optimizer will be able to put them in where they should be. I do want to make sure that I am getting at least a little bit of Nesmith exposure. I don't have to be at field weight, but I need to make sure he's showing up. TJ McConnell has been fantastic here lately over the last few games, but again, I'm really going to trust the optimizer here. The only thing I'm going to force in is Halliburton for now. That could change by the time I get to the pre-lock show. Pre-lock show, for those of you that don't know, is for VIP members only. That happens at 5:30 p.m. Eastern. Link is in the description there if you want to join that, or if you want access to the Discord or other sports. Definitely a lot of options there. We have a lot of really good coaches who do a lot of great work in the Discord, so definitely would recommend being there. And we have Upper Slide as well, who keeps everyone up to date on the news. So a lot of good stuff there. Yeah, Halliburton's just acting weird. I just wish he was low owned. With him being so chalky, it's just hard to prioritize him with the form he's been in. Yeah, like for me, I've always had my biggest wins taking shots, so I gotta get it. Nice, Jared. Awesome. Thank you for joining, man. I appreciate that. Uh, Definitely, like I said, Jared, make sure you get in the Discord. There's guys like Uppers, Beat Ups, Madness, Mutt, who give fantastic advice. I share what I do during the pre-lock show, just so everyone knows exactly where I'm at. We do have cheat sheets available as well, some really good notes. Usually you'll start to see that stuff coming through around like 4:30, 5:30, things of that sort. Yep. Appreciate you, Dave. If you all could hit the like, share, and subscribe button, that would be awesome. And yeah, definitely join the DFS Army fam. Appreciate that, Dave. Is this where I would get my better lineup advice? So, Jared, I just on this show, I give general thoughts on the slate. It's really early. We're game planning. We're just waiting on news, just kind of getting the brain thinking. And then when we get to the pre-lock show, I focus on execution and I just show exactly what I'm doing. If you want lineup advice, that's where the Discord will help you a lot. You can message any of the coaches and they'll give you advice, or you can also just talk in the Discord about getting some lineup advice as well. A lot of resources there. Prize picks. I know we have the Sharp app that does have a picks section that has been on fire. There's a link in the description if you want that too. But for DFS Army, let me look at the Discord right quick and see if we have a prize pick section. I don't play prize picks, so I don't have a freaking clue. But yeah. I know the Sharp app has a really good prize pick section. So I would personally recommend the Sharp app instead of DFS Army for prize picks advice, but I'm not an expert there learning, so I could be wrong. This is a show where just airs out all the laundry. Hey, I'm not going to say that. Anyway, let's get back on track. We have the Pistons going up against the Pacers. I didn't have anyone who stood out for me too much. This is the highest total game, so I would like to see exposure to Cade Cunningham. I don't know if I'm going to force matching ownership where I want to be right at 16%, but anywhere from like 10 to 16 makes sense for me. With this just being a really good game environment, I don't want to not have exposure to. Outside of that, the injury situation is going to dictate a lot for us here. We have Simone Fontecchio listed as questionable. Taj Gibson, questionable. I don't really care about him. And then Cade Cunningham was not on the injury report. Isaiah Stewart is out. With Cade coming back, we don't have to worry about Marcus Sasser. With Isaiah Stewart being ruled out, that should make Stanley Umada or Umid, I don't know how to pronounce his name, much more of a focal point. Or not focal point, but he should continue to stay in the starting lineup. He continues to be a viable play at 3,900. Sim Model likes him a lot. He didn't do great in the last game where he saw a lot of minutes, but that was against the Celtics. And so the Celtics are a much better defensive team than the Pacers are. So I'm very comfortable having plenty of exposure to Stanley tonight. And then Cade Cunningham, I want to match the field on. The situation with Fontecchio is pretty big. 5,700 is a decent price tag for him. I'm comfortable being close to field weight. He's not someone I'm going to try and force exposure to as of right now, just because I think he's priced appropriately. But I would like for him to show up a little bit as well. Duran and Ivy are more of like tier 3 options for me. They're just not top priorities. It's really making sure I get a little bit of Cade, making sure we have Stanley, who's one of the top 3 value options we have right now on the slate. And ideally, the optimizer would do the rest for me there. And again, we'll think more critically about that on the pre-lock show once we ideally have some insight around if Fontecchio will play tonight or not. All right. Next up, we have the Bucks. Damian Lillard is a thumbnail. He's on the thumbnail today, but he's situational for me, and we'll talk about it. Giannis is out, and we saw last time Bobby Portis went off when Giannis was out. Every now and again, Bobby will step up, and you're just like, how is he this cheap? Why did we not play him? He was so obvious. And usually when he sees 27 to like 30 minutes, he usually comes through. He can definitely be explosive, especially when Giannis is out. It looks like he might not be that chalky today. At 6K, I don't hate the price tag. The matchup's pretty brutal going up against the Celtics. They are one of the they are one of the top defenses in the NBA right now. Big thing for me, not really when it comes to Bobby Portis, but when it comes to some of the Bucks, is just the Celtics. They have quite a few very important questionable tags. Guys like Jaylen Brown, questionable. Drew Holiday, questionable. If Holiday gets ruled out, Lillard is someone I'm going to force into my lines because the matchup is significantly softer. And so he's someone I don't want to forget about if Holiday gets ruled out. If Holiday plays, I'm a little bit more neutral on the situation. If Lillard showed up, I wouldn't be mad about it, but I don't feel as much of a need to force exposure to Lillard if Drew Holiday is playing. Chris Middleton, I'm not looking at. Bobby Portis is interesting. Simano didn't like him. Matchup's not great. No one really liked him. But if he's going to be this low owned, it's worth taking some shots on Bobby Portis here at 6K. He definitely has at least 40-point upside, but it wouldn't shock me if we can see a little bit more here than that. So with him not being chalky, it's like the reverse of Halliburton, where he's so chalky, I'm kind of getting a little bit nervous about it. Bobby Portis isn't as chalky as he should be, especially coming off a really good game. Matchup isn't great. So again, not a safe play. That's why he's not seeing ownership, but he's too low owned at this point. Wouldn't shock me if that changes later, though. Let's see. Who's next? Next up, we have the Celtics going up against the Bucks. For the Celtics, we talked about it. Brown and Holiday are questionable. Sam Hauser's questionable. This matters because we can see a guy like Peyton Pritchard start here if Holiday gets ruled out. Even if Brown gets ruled out, that's a possible starter that they could rotate in. We saw Derek White have a fantastic performance the other night that we were on, which is awesome. For the Bucks, we know that their team has improved defensively, but without Giannis, I do expect them to suffer a little bit, and we'd like to play guards against the Bucks. This is a situation where it's not really worth spending too much time on them because we already know if Brown gets ruled out, we're playing a shit ton of Tatum and White. If Holiday gets ruled out, we're playing a lot of White, and whoever starts for him, which would probably be Pritchard, and so I'm going to make sure I get some exposure to him in a matchup against the Bucks that's a bit softer than it would appear on paper. So this is just another situation that we get a lot in NBA DFS where you just have to wait and see who's going to actually play here. They're also just a little under-owned. This is a relatively high total game for what we've been seeing recently, so I don't want to forget about it. I will force exposure here. We just have to wait on the injury news to really dictate what the best spots are. A game where a lot of these guys are going to show up for us is the Knicks against the Raptors. I've been saying it ever since they've traded OG away. We pick on the Raptors now, and you just do that. You play whoever's going up against the Raptors, and you don't overthink it. The Kings are a little hard because for the most part, a lot of their star players are pretty healthy. Sasha Vezenkov is questionable. Kevin Huerter is out. Kevin Huerter getting ruled out does make things a little bit more interesting for the Kings tonight. For instance, we saw Herter barely played in that last game against Memphis. And so we saw Keon Ellis move into Herter's role, and he played a lot of minutes. And he was okay. He didn't, break the world or anything like that. But in a softer matchup against the Raptors, I expect him to have a much better performance. I mentioned that there's like a top 3 value options. We mentioned Stanley already. Keon Ellis is another one of those value options. The good news is we're not locked into having to pick one. And so I like to just have like a nice rotation of these guys. But I'll probably still be significantly over the field. So a 3,700 player seeing 30 plus minutes, I'm going to play that every time, especially in a soft matchup. Other guys I like a lot, this entire team. Sabonis is someone I'm not going to let get off my radar. This Raptors front court is not good right now. De'Aaron Fox is showing up close to a core play for me naturally. The domination station likes him a lot. I like picking on the Raptors, so I'm not going to lower that. Malik Monk is someone who benefits from a usage rate standpoint, and his role is also a bit more secure when Kevin Huerter is out. So I'm looking to prioritize Monk. And then Keegan Murray is more of a sim model play. We know he can be explosive. We know he can break slates. And in a soft matchup, I want to make sure I get some exposure to him as well. So the Kings are a team I'm looking to build around tonight and focus on a lot. The blowout does concern me. That's definitely an area of concern, but I don't typically play for blowouts. A lot of these NBA games, and we saw it last night with the Mavs and the Nuggets, these games tend to stay a little bit closer than we think, but then we also see crazy blowouts all the time too. So hard to predict, so I just don't try to predict it. What's up, Learning? Appreciate that, man. Nikki, I know. I miss Zolo. He showed up on the pre-lock show. Was it earlier this week or towards the end of last week? And I was like, I miss you, man. I miss the revenge narratives, but people have lives. You can't hold them too much. Shooter said, "What's up, man? Hope you're well. Can you pair Nora kind of hooping LOL at 3,800 and Abaji at 3,700 on DK together for value?" Don't love it. I'll be honest. I don't love that pairing. I do like Nora a bit more. He's one of those other value options that are standing out a bit for me. Abaji's kind of like your pivot off of Nora is how I'm thinking about him. He has a lower points per minute, lower usage, but he's been playing more minutes. And so he can have, in theory, similar upside just because he's playing so often. But I don't love pairing them together, especially in single entry. I don't know if I'm going to make a rule to not pair them. It just depends on how much I see that happening in the optimizer. But we'll see. We'll see. But yeah, as of right now, I'm not a fan of it. Not together, but separate, fine. Nikki, I know. Rodney said, "What team would you prioritize tonight?" The ones that we touched on so far, it's for as a whole, a team and not just a couple of players I like. It's the Kings. And then we'll talk about some of the other guys too. For the Raptors, I don't like these guys as much as I thought I would, but they show up a lot naturally in the domination station, which is our optimizer here. So I don't really have to force too much exposure here. In the sim model, which is a tool I value a lot, Jonte Porter showed up a lot, and he has a ton of upside in a spot like this at 4K. He's really cheap. He doesn't need to stay out of foul trouble, but as long as he can do that, I think he'll be in a pretty good spot to get us where we need to be tonight. And then Nora's the same way. He's a decent points per minute player, decent usage rate. He makes me nervous when he's chalky, but it was hard for me to find a reason not to play him. And then we talked about Baji. He's a solid pivot. Kelly O, Gary Trent Jr., Bruce Brown, Grady Dick. They are all viable plays who are showing up for me currently. I'm just not prioritizing them as much. So yeah, this game, second highest total game on the slate, and that's part of why you're seeing so much exposure to them. Again, blowout risk is there, but I'm not trying to overthink that. For the Jazz going up against the Thunder, the Jazz are in an interesting spot. So Lauri Markkanen is out. He has been playing for a little bit. He's out for maintenance, so nothing crazy. But with him out, it does make some of the Jazz a bit more viable again, just because he has such a high usage rate for this team. Guys that we haven't had to look at, like Bryce Senabal and Taylor Hendricks, are now viable plays again. John Collins is questionable. He's dealing with that. I feel so bad because he's actually hurt, but he got messed up in that Anthony Edwards dunk. That was fantastic. And so if John Collins gets ruled out, I really like Walker Kessler tonight. If John Collins plays, and I would expect Walker Kessler to start in that situation if John Collins sits tonight, but that's more hopeful thinking, wishful narratives. But if the slate was to happen right now, I wouldn't have too much interest in the Jazz tonight, mostly just because I think they're priced where they should be. I don't think we're getting too much value here. The matchup against the Thunder is a pretty neutral one, one that I like to attack typically when the price is right, especially playing bigs against the Thunder because they've been not great there, which makes John Collins a little bit interesting. But at his 7K price tag, I just feel like that's where he should be. At 7K, we need him to score 42 points. And 42 points is not impossible for him. It's just he typically doesn't have that upside typically. He has been in better form. So he's shown us that he has that 40-point upside against Phoenix, against Golden State, against Chicago and Washington recently. It's really just one of those spots I'm not overly excited about, though. So it's not impossible. I just don't love the price tag, to be honest. I think we have better value throughout. But Walker Kessler, really want John Collins to sit for that reason. Taylor Hendricks and Bryce would be a bit more interesting to me if we didn't have some pretty solid value already on the slate. Not bad plays, not bad matchups, just hard to value them over guys like Nora and other guys. For the Thunder, they have the soft matchup going up against the Jazz tonight. Thunder are healthy, which is a pain for us to figure out who to prioritize. But two guys stood out for me. I'll be honest with you all. The Jazz are awful everywhere. They're giving up the fourth most fantasy points to point guards. They're giving up the second most fantasy points to scoring wings. They're giving up the fourth most fantasy points to centers. They are god-awful everywhere. But Chet is someone who's low owned, who will be a leverage play for me tonight. I can say that pretty definitively, as long as his ownership stays low at 7%. I plan on being around 15 to 20. Jalen Williams is just good, and he's in a soft matchup, and I'm going to make sure I'm at least around field weight exposure. But I really like the matchup here. Anyone else? Yeah, no one else is really standing out for me on this team. I will make sure I have exposure to SGA. Like I said, this team is not great from a defensive standpoint. I just can't commit to saying I'll be right at field weight exposure on SGA because he is pricey, and I still have to see how those lines work. But ideally, I would be right around 20-25% on SGA tonight. All right, we got to speed through this now. For the Clippers going up against the Trailblazers, another team that's going up against just a really bad defense. The Portland Trailblazers are giving up the third most fantasy points to combo guards, and then they're giving up the fourth most fantasy points to post bigs. For me, when the Clippers are healthy, they're a little bit harder to predict. Terrence Mann is questionable. Norman Powell is questionable. If they get ruled out, it should solidify the role for the starters tonight. They should play a bit more, but I'm not overly concerned there. The hardest part is just none of them really stood out for me. If I had to pick one, I'll pick James Harden. But as of right now, one of the lower total games on the slate, pretty widespread. Again, I don't love to play the blowout narrative. It wouldn't shock me if one of Kawhi, Harden, or PG went off tonight. Just no one stood out for me in my research so far. At low ownership, though, I do kind of like taking the shot on James Harden. I'm going to dig a little bit deeper into it, but he's on my radar. I'm going to put a like on him just to make sure I don't forget about him later. All right, for the Trailblazers, and then Zubac is interesting, but again, we have enough value where there's some centers I like paying up for on this slate, and I don't want to forget about them. And so for the Trailblazers tonight, Jeremy Grant's doubtful, Matisse Thybulle's questionable, Brogdon and Sharp have been out for a while. Scoot Henderson wasn't someone I was overly excited about, but the sim model liked him a lot, and you all know I trust the sim model, so I do plan on at least matching the field on Scoot Henderson tonight, even though I don't personally love the spot that much. DeAndre Ayton is also popping a lot in the sim, and for me, it's one of those situations where I never trust DeAndre Ayton. I feel like you're a little silly if you do. The matchup itself, wait. Yeah, the matchup itself going up against the Clippers is just not a great matchup for anyone here. They're an above average defense. They're giving up the 15th most points to centers right now, so pretty neutral there. Is really one of those just trusting the sim model plays, and at low ownership, 2% on Ayton. Me putting like a 5% min on him wouldn't be too crazy, but I'm not trying to go too out of my way to play the Trailblazers tonight, besides the 2 sim model plays. Sixers going up against the Suns. I told y'all there's 3 guards who y'all are not going to like that I'm playing tonight. And we're looking at one of them right now on this team. The Sixers have Tobias Harris listed as questionable. Maxey came through for us last time around. It does look like Harris was present at shoot around. So looking a little bit more likely he's going to play here. But I like playing guards against the Suns. They have struggled defensively against guards all season long. I can get you some numbers on that. Hopefully, it's not surprisingly higher. They have improved a little bit, but they're still giving up the 7th most fantasy points to combo guards. And so Tyrese Maxey fits into that category. With Tobias Harris now looking like he's going to play, I'm not really interested in any of the other options outside of Maxey at pretty low ownership. Sim model didn't love Maxey, and because of that, I probably won't make him a leverage play, but I'll try to at least match the field on Maxey at 10%. And if I get a little bit more, I'm not going to be mad about that. Yeah, Nikki, I love 5 to 6 gamers. A 5 to 6 game slate to me is ideal. I don't feel like we need these last 3 games on this slate, but you know, what do I know? What do I know? Yeah, I would love that. Like a 3-game night slate, 5-game main slate would be beautiful. Oh, Coach Chris, you're onto something here. You're in my head. For the Suns, they are healthy. The thing that they have going for them is that they're going up against the Sixers, who have been god awful here lately. KD and Booker still feel a little pricey to me. You can take a shot here because the matchup's pretty soft. But the 2 guys I'm looking to prioritize are Nurkic because of the soft matchup going up against the Sixers, who are really bad right now without Embiid. And the sim model liked him, which has made me like him a little bit more. So he's probably going to be a leverage play for me tonight. And then Bradley Beal, we have a little bit of a hate-love relationship. Sometimes I miss his big performances. Sometimes I get him. A little harder to predict, but he's been in really good form, like you mentioned, Coach Chris. And the matchup against the Sixers doesn't worry me at all anymore. And so if he's going to be low owned, and again, one of the game totals that aren't extremely low, like this Heat Cavs game, Clippers Portland, this Memphis Warriors game, is still one of the better game environments. I'm comfortable forcing some exposure to Bradley Beal at low ownership. And I'm not taking it's not as much of an investment taking a shot on Beal as it is investing 9,200, 9,400 in guys like KD and Booker, when I would much rather just pay up and play Lillard if Drew is out, or SGA, or we'll talk about another guy too in the next game. So it's just hard for me to prioritize those 2 guys right now. The Grizzlies, I am not going to read through all the guys they have out right now. But they do have Aldama and Vince Williams listed as doubtful. They're missing quite a few guys, which are why we're going to play some Grizzlies tonight. The matchup against the Warriors is... I'm trying to think about the best way of describing it. It's... For some of the bigs, it's softer on paper than it actually is, just because the Warriors are trying to get into playoff form if they're able to actually make it to the playoffs. And so they're starting to improve from a defensive standpoint, but it's still far from like the toughest matchup out there. Desmond Bane, I was hoping was going to be a little bit lower owned matchup. I've been saying it a lot. Guards have been struggling all season against the Warriors. It's been the one position they haven't been that great at defending against. Sim Auto like Desmond Bane a good bit because they're missing a lot of guys and he's going to have to play a lot of minutes tonight, which is why he's seeing ownership. I need to keep the like on him. Just because he should be out there so much and he has such a high usage rate. He's a talented player, relatively cheap-ish at 8,100 for the role he has. Same exact story for Jaren Jackson Jr., but Jaren Jackson Jr. has a bit of a the Warriors are just giving more points up to bigs. So I feel more confident in JJJ than I do Desmond Bane. I am ranking them in that order. Desmond Bane, I'm still just on the fence on, but he just makes sense because they're missing so many guys. So if it was a regular team that had Bane, I wouldn't be excited about it, but I think I just have to eat some of the chalk here. GG, Aldama, I'm not really paying too much attention to. I think he's priced appropriately for his upside and the matchup. Jake LaRavia stood out for me in the sim model. I feel like he's cheap. Again, not overly concerned about the matchup, even though it is more difficult than it appears. He's been playing pretty consistent minutes, just like the rest of these guys, all the guys they have out. And so he's someone I will make sure shows up for me. I'm not expecting him to start, but he's cheap and he'll still see plenty of run. He's a much safer play if Aldama gets ruled out, but I like him either way. Rodney, I like Maxey. I want to at least be around field weight, which will be around 10%. Sim model didn't like him, so it makes my excitement go down a little bit. But if I get more than 10%, I wouldn't be mad about it. But yeah, I like Jaren Jackson Jr. I like Jake LaRavia. GG Jackson showing up a good bit for me naturally in the optimizer. I'm never overly opinionated on GG. When he shows up, he shows up. And right now he's showing up for me around field weight exposure, but I'm not going to force that. All right. Next up, we have the Warriors side of things, a team that has Draymond Green listed as questionable. If Draymond Green misses this game, that could open up some things and some options for us here. But assuming he plays, I'm not overly excited about the Warriors tonight, but that's something to watch out for. Moses Moody's questionable, but that doesn't impact too much these days. So for me, Steph Curry is another guy I was hoping was going to be relatively low owned because he just hasn't been in the best of form. Maybe I'm wrong about that. Let me double check. Yeah, he just hasn't shown us upside since the end of February against the Lakers. So I was hoping, kind of like Halliburton, Curry would be relatively low owned, but at 8,700, he's a little bit too cheap for the upside he brings. Matchup against the Grizzlies is fantastic. So there's a lot of reasons to like Curry tonight, but kind of like Halliburton, I'm a little bit less excited about these guys now that they're so chalky, but I'm still planning on playing them, still planning on being at least around field weight, and that's just the way that's going to be. The other options for the Warriors is really going to depend on Draymond Green. Guys like Kuminga, Tracy Jackson see a nice boost if he gets ruled out. But for now, everyone feels a little bit too cute, too risky for me outside of Curry. How is Tracy Jackson or LaRavia DK GPP? I like LaRavia tonight. Tracy Jackson, I think, becomes super interesting if Draymond Green gets ruled out. Umid or Great. I'm just gonna call him Stanley. Daniel. I'm sorry. I don't know how to say his last name. Stanley or Grady Dick for cheap option. For me, it's Stanley. Dick is he that cheap? I thought he was a little more expensive. Yeah, 4,700. It's not bad. But if it's like your last spot, you go Grady Dick. You go Grady Dick if he's your last spot. But just from like who I'll have more exposure to tonight, it's going to be Stanley. Just because Stanley's like 3K. And he plays a shit ton of minutes. All right. So yeah, guys, that's the slate in a nutshell. It's an interesting one. Sorry the show went a little long today. There's a lot to talk about. But I'll see you all tomorrow, or I'll see you on the pre-lock show later today. Wish you all nothing but the best of luck. Peace out.